The first sign was a text message, not even meant for me, just a preview that flashed across his phone while it lay on our kitchen counter. Miss you already. Can't wait until next week. Something in my chest tightened. That primal instinct women develop after years of being told we're overthinking things. I didn't touch his phone. I didn't need to. Things with Robert had been different for months. The late nights at work, the sudden business trips, the way his eyes would drift to his phone every time it buzzed. 15 years of marriage had taught me his rhythms, and this new pattern was as foreign as waking up in someone else's skin. Working late again? I'd ask, trying to keep my voice casual while setting dinner for one. Big client, Sarah. You know how it is. His excuses rolled off his tongue with practiced ease, and I nodded as if I believed him. As if I didn't notice how he'd started showering the moment he got home. As if I didn't see the receipts for dinners I never shared tucked into his wallet. I'm not proud of what I did next, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I checked our shared credit card statement, the one I'd been too busy to look at for months while managing my mother's cancer treatments and working full-time. Hotel charges in town, not out of town where his meetings supposedly were. Florist charges on random Tuesdays. A jewelry purchase 3 days before my birthday, though all I'd received was a hastily bought scarf and a distracted kiss. The pieces fell together like a puzzle I never wanted to complete. My friend Diane had warned me years ago when Robert's colleague divorced her husband for similar reasons. Men like them, she'd said, swirling her wine glass. They hit 40 and panic. Suddenly they need to prove they've still got it. I'd defended him then, confident in our partnership, in the life we'd built in our suburban Atlanta home, with our 2 children now away at college. The evidence kept mounting. A lipstick smudge on his collar. So cliché it would have been laughable if it weren't tearing my world apart. The mysterious weekend conferences. The way he'd stopped reaching for me at night, claiming exhaustion, but then spending hours on his phone in the bathroom. I could have confronted him right away. That's what the old Sarah would have done. Direct, no nonsense, cards on the table. But something held me back. Maybe it was fear of what would come after. Or maybe I needed time to process that the man who'd promised to grow old with me was building a life with someone else behind my back. Instead, I started my own investigation. I noted his patterns, the days he claimed to work late, the inconsistencies in his stories. I checked our finances, discovering money flowing to accounts I didn't recognize. Small amounts, but they added up. Death by 1,000 cuts, just like our marriage. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the realization that I'd become invisible to him. The way he'd look through me when I spoke, the absent-minded pats on my shoulder replacing the embraces that used to make me feel safe. Somewhere along the way, I'd become furniture in the life he'd outgrown. I remember sitting alone in our kitchen one night, surrounded by the evidence of his other life, wondering when exactly I'd lost him, or if I ever truly had him at all. Was it when I spent those months caring for my dying mother? When I decided not to die away my grays? When the kids left home and the silence between us grew louder than any conversation? In that moment, staring at credit card statements and hotel receipts spread across our maple dining table, the one we'd picked out together on our 10th anniversary, I made a decision. This wouldn't be a desperate confrontation fueled by tears and accusations. No. If Robert had been methodically building his exit strategy, then I would craft my response with equal care. After all, I hadn't spent 15 years building a life with this man to watch it crumble without dignity. I've always been good with details. It's what made me excel as an accountant. And now those same skills would help me uncover the full extent of Robert's betrayal. I didn't rush. I didn't confront. Instead, I became a detective in my own marriage. The woman's name was Vanessa. I found it by tracking down the jewelry store receipt and sweetly asking about the purchase. My husband bought me something special, but I'm afraid I damaged it. Could I see what the warranty covers? The saleswoman pulled up the record, then hesitated. This was the gold bracelet with Vanessa engraved inside, correct? Her eyes widened slightly as she saw my expression shift. Vanessa Ellis, his new marketing director, 15 years younger, with degrees from prestigious universities and a LinkedIn profile full of professional portraits, where she looked simultaneously competent and seductive. I'd met her at the company Christmas party 6 months ago. She'd complimented my earrings while refilling Robert's drink. I'd thanked her, thinking how nice it was that Robert had hired someone so polite. I took a week off work without telling Robert, claiming to visit our daughter at college. Instead, I sat in rental cars outside restaurants where they lingered over lunch, watched them enter the Westwood Hotel on Wednesday afternoons, observed how his hand would rest on the small of her back when he thought no one was looking. I catalogued every touch, every smile, all the things that used to be mine. The most painful discovery came when I followed them to a real estate showing. Through the large windows of a modern townhouse, I watched them walk through rooms, pointing and discussing, planning a future. That night, Robert came home and kissed my cheek before talking about retirement plans for our future. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to demand how we could stand there and speak of our future while shopping for homes with her. But strategic patience had become my armor. So I smiled and nodded and asked questions about 401ks while dying inside. My mother always said knowledge is power, and I was becoming powerful indeed. I hired a private investigator, an old college friend who owed me a favor, to dig deeper. The results were worse than I'd imagined. Robert had opened a separate bank account months ago. He'd updated his will. He'd consulted a divorce attorney but hadn't filed yet, all while sleeping beside me each night, accepting the meals I cooked, wearing the shirts I ironed. The final piece came when I gained access to his email. I'm not proud of this part, but he'd used the same password for years. Our wedding date followed by my maiden name. Such irony. There I found their conversations, their plans, their intimate exchanges. I found something else too. His complaints about me. How I'd let myself go. How I was always focused on work or her mother. How he deserved happiness in his prime years. Each discovery was a knife to my heart, but also a strange relief. The gaslighting, the feeling that I was crazy for suspecting something, all washed away with concrete evidence. There's clarity in confirmation, even when it hurts. During this time, Robert noticed nothing different about me. Not my sleepless nights, not my careful questions, not the way I sometimes stared at him across the dinner table wondering who this stranger was. He was too enraptured with his new life to notice the woman he was discarding. One evening, after he canceled our weekend plans with another transparent lie, I sat in our home office organizing everything I'd gathered. Emails, photos, financial records, property information, the complete anatomy of a betrayal. I created copies, stored them securely both digitally and physically. As I worked, I noticed my hands had stopped shaking. The constant knot in my stomach had loosened. In its place was something new. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. It was determination, clarity. For weeks I'd been gathering information, but now it was time to decide what to do with it. That's when I realized knowledge without action is just self-torture. I could continue this shadow existence, collecting evidence while my dignity eroded, or I could take control of the narrative. After all, the story of my marriage might be ending, but the story of my life wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I closed my laptop and picked up my phone. "Hello, Patricia," I said when my friend answered. "Remember how you said your brother is the best divorce attorney in the state? I think it's time we had coffee." Patricia's brother Michael wasn't just a good lawyer. He was a shark in an Armani suit. When I spread my evidence across his polished mahogany desk, his eyebrows rose higher with each document. "Most clients come to me with suspicions," he said, examining a particularly damning email exchange. "You've brought me a case that's practically gift-wrapped." We spent 3 hours discussing strategy. Michael explained that Georgia's equitable distribution laws meant I was entitled to a fair share of our marital assets, including Robert's business, which I'd helped fund in the early years with my accounting salary while he established himself. "What about the house?" I asked. Our colonial-style home represented 15 years of memories. Christmas mornings with the kids, dinner parties with friends, the garden I'd cultivated through countless weekends. It's marital property. Either it gets sold and you split the proceeds, or one of you buys the other out. He paused. "What do you want, Sarah?" What did I want? The question echoed in my mind during the drive home. Revenge? Peace? A time machine to go back before everything shattered? I realized what I wanted most was dignity. The power to shape what happened next, instead of being a victim in Robert's carefully planned exit strategy. If he wanted out, fine. But it would be on my terms. not his. The next 3 weeks were a blur of calculated preparation. I transferred my portion of our joint accounts into a new bank account Robert couldn't access. I secured copies of all important documents, birth certificates, property deeds, insurance policies. I consulted a financial advisor about protecting my retirement funds. I even started quietly moving treasured personal items to a storage unit, family heirlooms, irreplaceable photos, the antique jewelry my grandmother left me, all while maintaining the performance of normalcy at home. I still prepared dinners on the nights Robert bothered to show up, still asked about his day, still watched our usual Thursday night shows together, though now I studied his profile in the blue glow of the television, wondering how someone could become such a stranger while sitting 2 feet away. The hardest part was telling our children. I drove to Emma's university campus and took her to lunch. At 20, she was perceptive enough to know something was wrong the moment she saw my face. "Is it Grandma?" she asked immediately, fear flashing in her eyes. "No, honey. Mom's stable," I assured her. "It's about your father and me." I'd promised myself I wouldn't disparage Robert to our children, wouldn't make them choose sides, but I also refused to lie. I explained that their father was involved with someone else, that our marriage was ending, and that while the details would unfold over time, they needed to know now because things would change soon. Emma's reaction surprised me. Instead of shock, I saw recognition in her eyes, followed by a sad nod. "He calls her when he thinks I'm not paying attention," she said quietly. "Last time I was home for the weekend. I heard him in the garage." She reached for my hand across the table. "I'm so sorry, Mom." My son Jake took the news differently. At 18 and just starting college, his response was anger. At his father, at the situation, even partially at me for letting it happen. I let him vent, understanding his need to process. By the end of our conversation, his anger had settled into a protective determination. "You're not staying in the house with him, are you?" he demanded. "You can come live near campus. I'll help you find a place." I hugged him, marveling at how my children had suddenly become the adults offering protection. "I have a plan," I assured him. "I just need you to trust me." The final piece fell into place when Robert announced another business trip for the coming weekend. Through my network of information, I knew he and Vanessa were actually planning a getaway to Savannah. It was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. While Robert packed his overnight bag, whistling as if he didn't have a care in the world, I confirmed arrangements with Michael. Everything was in position. The documents would be served while Robert was with Vanessa, catching them both off guard, away from their professional environments where they could manage appearances. "Will you be okay here alone?" Robert asked as he loaded his bag into the car, the perfect picture of a concerned husband. I smiled, a genuine smile that seemed to catch him off guard. "I'll be just fine," I said. And for the first time in months, I meant it. As his car disappeared down our tree-lined street, I took a deep breath. The waiting was over. The next time I saw Robert, everything would be different. The truth would be exposed, the power dynamics shifted, the future rewritten. I walked back into the house, our house, and started packing. Not everything, not yet. Just enough for the first phase of my new life. The life where I was no longer a supporting character in Robert's story, but the protagonist of my own. Sunday evening brought a thunderstorm that matched my mood perfectly. I sat in our living room, lights dimmed, listening to rain lash against windows as I waited. Michael had confirmed everything had gone according to plan. The papers had been served to Robert and Vanessa during their romantic brunch at a waterfront restaurant in Savannah. A public setting. Witnesses everywhere. No opportunity to hide. The thought of their faces as the server approached with legal documents instead of mimosas brought me the first genuine smile I'd had in months. My phone had been exploding all afternoon. 17 missed calls from Robert. 38 text messages ranging from confusion to anger to desperate pleas. I read each one, noting his progression through the stages of panic. First denial. There must be a mistake. Then anger. How dare you humiliate me this way? Followed by bargaining. We can talk about this, just answer your phone. The latest messages had reached a pathetic desperation I'd never seen from him before. I didn't respond to any of them. The headlights sweeping across the driveway announced his arrival hours earlier than planned. Their weekend getaway cut tragically short. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and reminded myself of my worth. The woman he was about to face wasn't the same one he'd left behind 2 days ago. The front door flew open, bringing in gusts of rain and the disheveled form of my husband. His normally perfect hair was a mess, his designer shirt rumpled, his eyes wild as they found me sitting calmly in the armchair. "What the hell, Sarah?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "You had me served? At a restaurant? With Vanessa right there?" "Yes." One word, steady and unapologetic. He ran his hands through his wet hair, pacing like a caged animal. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Her father is on the board of directors. This could ruin me professionally." A laugh escaped me, harsh, unfamiliar. "That's your concern? Your professional reputation? Not the fact that you've been living a double life? Planning to leave me while pretending everything was fine? It's not what you think. Save it, Robert." I stood up, facing him fully. "I've seen the emails, the bank accounts. I know about the townhouse viewings, the bracelet with her name engraved on it. I know everything." The color drained from his face as he realized the extent of my knowledge. For a moment, he looked small, diminished by the weight of his exposed deception. "How long have you known?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible over the storm outside. "Long enough to prepare properly." I gestured to the coffee table where I'd arranged copies of key evidence. Just copies, the originals safely stored elsewhere. "Long enough to discover you've been siphoning money from our joint accounts. Long enough to find out about the changes to your will. Long enough to learn that the business trip to Chicago last month was actually a weekend with her in New York." He stared at the papers, then back at me, his expression shifting from shock to calculation. I'd seen that look before, in meetings when he was recalibrating his strategy after an unexpected setback. "Sarah, we can work this out." His tone softened, attempting the charming reconciliation I'd anticipated. "What happened with Vanessa? It's just a phase, a mistake. You and I have 15 years together, a family." "Had," I corrected him. "We had 15 years. Now we have divorce proceedings." "You can't be serious." A nervous laugh. "You're really throwing away our marriage over one indiscretion?" "One?" I picked up a folder and pulled out time-stamped photos of their various rendezvous. Try 17 documented meetings in the past 3 months alone. Try a separate bank account. Try shopping for real estate together. I let the photos fall back onto the table. This wasn't an indiscretion, Robert. This was a calculated exit strategy. You just didn't expect me to find my own exit first. Thunder cracked outside, punctuating my words. Robert sank onto the couch, the facade of indignation crumbling into something more genuine. Fear. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Everything I'm entitled to. Half the business you built while I supported our family. The house. My fair share of all assets. Full transparency on finances." I delivered the terms Michael and I had prepared, watching them land like physical blows. "That's impossible. The business can't survive. Should have thought of that before you charged hotel rooms on our joint credit card." I moved toward the staircase, done with this conversation. "Your things have been packed. You can stay in the guest room tonight if you want, but I expect you gone by tomorrow. My lawyer will contact yours with details. Where am I supposed to go?" His voice rose, incredulous. I paused on the stairs, looking back at the stranger I'd once built a life with. "Perhaps Vanessa can help you figure that out. Though I'm not sure how eager she'll be now that your convenient timeline has been disrupted." As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I heard something break downstairs. A glass, maybe. Or perhaps the last remnant of the life Robert had planned. I closed my door, surprisingly calm. The confrontation I'd dreaded for weeks had come and gone, leaving me not shattered, but stronger. The storm would continue, both outside and in our unraveling lives, but for the first time in months, I felt sheltered from its worst effects. The days after Robert moved out unfolded in unexpected ways. I'd imagined I would collapse once the adrenaline wore off, fall apart in the empty house, surrounded by the ghostly echoes of our failed marriage. Instead, I experienced a strange, almost unsettling calm. I slept better than I had in months, spreading across the entire bed that was now mine alone. Of course, there were moments. Finding his forgotten cufflink behind the dresser. The automatic reach for the phone to tell him something before remembering. The sudden quiet of Sunday mornings without his newspaper rustling. Each pinprick of memory threatening to deflate my newfound strength. What I hadn't anticipated was the collateral damage beyond our immediate family. Friends began choosing sides, some reaching out with awkward sympathy, others conspicuously silent. My mother-in-law, who I'd been close with for years, left a voicemail so cold it could have frozen the phone. "I always knew you weren't good enough for him," she said, a sentiment she'd apparently been holding back for 15 years. The most surprising reaction came from Robert's boss, Philip, who called me directly 1 week after the separation. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out," he said, his normally boisterous voice subdued. "I wanted you to know that the company doesn't condone what happened. The board has concerns about Robert's judgment and the potential liability his relationship with Vanessa creates." I hadn't considered the professional fallout for Robert. While I didn't want to destroy his career out of spite, I couldn't muster much sympathy either. "What happens now?" I asked, curious despite myself. "Vanessa has been transferred to our Seattle office, effective immediately. As for Robert, his position is being reevaluated." After hanging up, I sat in my garden, processing this information while deadheading roses. There was a certain poetic justice to it all. Robert's carefully constructed plan was unraveling thread by thread, while I, the wife he'd dismissed as predictable and past her prime, was finding unexpected strength in the wreckage. Emma came home from college for the weekend, bringing a protective energy that both touched and unsettled me. She insisted on sleeping in her old room rather than staying with friends as she usually did, and I often caught her watching me with concern, as if expecting me to shatter at any moment. "I'm okay, you know," I told her as we prepared dinner together. "You don't need to babysit me." "I'm not," she protested, though we both knew she was. "I just want to be here. Your father called you, didn't he?" I set down the knife I was using to chop vegetables. Emma's silence was answer enough. "What did he say?" She sighed, abandoning the pretense. "He wanted me to talk to you. Said you were being unreasonable about the divorce terms. That you're trying to take everything he's worked for." The audacity was so breathtaking I almost laughed. "And what did you tell him?" That he should have thought about that before he started sleeping with someone barely older than his daughter. Her eyes flashed with an anger that reminded me startlingly of myself. I told him not to put me in the middle again. I hugged her then, my brave, fierce daughter. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this. I'm more worried about you, Mom." Dad's apartment is ridiculous, by the way. All chrome and leather like some midlife crisis showroom. This time I did laugh. Of course it is. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed, I received a text from an unknown number. He said you'd never find out. "I'm sorry. Vanessa." Reaching out from Seattle, offering an apology that felt both insufficient and unexpectedly significant. I didn't respond. What could I possibly say to the woman who had been sleeping with my husband? That I forgave her? I didn't. That I wished her well? I couldn't. That her actions had inadvertently freed me from a marriage that had been slowly suffocating me. That seemed too intimate a revelation to share with someone who had viewed my existence as an inconvenient obstacle. The most difficult conversation came when Jake drove home from college unannounced, appearing at my door with red-rimmed eyes and a duffel bag. "I went to see Dad first," he admitted as we sat in the kitchen. "Thought I should hear both sides." My heart squeezed. "That's fair." He tried to make it sound like you drove him to it, like you were so focused on work and Grandma that he had no choice. Jake's voice cracked. He actually expected me to understand. Said men have needs like that. Explains everything. I reached for his hand across the table, this boy becoming man with his father's features, but, thankfully, not his character. What people do reflects who they are, not who you are. Your father made his choices. They weren't about me, not really, and they certainly weren't about you or Emma. Jake squeezed my hand. I told him I was staying with you this weekend. He got mad, said I was taking sides. "And are you?" He looked up, his eyes clear now despite the pain in them. "I'm not taking sides, Mom. I'm just choosing to be where the truth is." That night, after Jake had gone upstairs to his old room, I sat alone on the back porch, listening to early summer crickets and contemplating how the family I'd fought so hard to preserve had transformed into something entirely different, smaller in some ways, but unexpectedly stronger in others. The betrayal that I'd feared would destroy us had instead revealed what was unbreakable. I checked my email one last time before bed, finding a message from Michael with good news. Our petition for temporary financial arrangements had been approved. Robert would need to continue covering the mortgage and utilities while our assets were being evaluated. A small victory, but it meant I could stay in my home, keep supporting my mother's care, and begin planning for whatever came next. Whatever came next. For the first time, those words felt like a promise rather than a threat. 3 months after Robert moved out, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years, browsing a community college catalog, not for Emma or Jake, but for me. The accounting courses caught my eye first, familiar territory where I could update my certifications. But it was the photography class that made me pause, remembering the camera that had sat unused in our closet since our honeymoon, when Robert complained that I was wasting time taking pictures of everything. "You should do it," urged Patricia over coffee the next day. She'd become my most reliable support, showing up with wine on bad days and dragging me out of the house on good ones. "When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to?" I couldn't remember. The divorce proceedings crawled forward with the expected legal wrangling. Robert's initial shock had hardened into resentment, especially after he was demoted at work, a consequence he blamed entirely on me, rather than his own poor judgment. His settlement offers grew increasingly unreasonable, each one rejected by Michael with professional disdain. "He's stalling," Michael explained during our monthly update, "hoping you'll get tired or desperate enough to accept less than you deserve." He didn't understand that time was now my ally, not my enemy. Each passing week brought new discoveries, not just about the divorce, but about myself. I enrolled in that photography class and rediscovered a passion I'd abandoned years ago. I volunteered at the hospital where my mother received treatment, finding unexpected solace in helping others navigate the same bewildering medical system I'd mastered by necessity. I reclaimed friendships that had faded during my marriage, reconnecting with women who welcomed me back without judgment. The house transformed too. I painted the master bedroom a serene blue that Robert would have hated, rearranged furniture to my taste, planted vegetables instead of the formal landscaping he'd insisted upon. Each change small but significant, a visible reclamation of space that had once been a compromise. My phone still lit up with Robert's name occasionally, usually late at night when I suspected he'd been drinking. The messages evolved from angry accusations to maudlin reminiscence to awkward attempts at reconciliation. "We could try counseling," read one particularly desperate text. "I've realized what I've lost. What you've lost. Not who. Not me as a person, but me as a possession. A convenience. A supporting character in his life story." I deleted the message without responding. The real turning point came in August, 6 months into our separation. Emma called with news that sent me spiraling back into the hurt I thought I'd processed. "Dad's getting married again," she said, her voice careful, measuring my reaction through the phone. "To Vanessa. In October." The timeline confirmed what I'd suspected all along. His relationship with her wasn't a brief indiscretion, but a long-planned replacement. The engagement coming so quickly after our separation wasn't spontaneous passion. It was the next step in a blueprint that had been drawn long before I discovered the truth. "Are you okay?" Emma asked into my silence. I surprised myself with my answer. "I think I am." The news hurt, yes, but like pressing on a bruise that was already healing. A dull ache rather than the sharp agony it would have been months before. Later that week, I had dinner with my friend Diana, who'd been divorced for years. "It gets easier," she promised, topping off my wine glass. "Then it gets good. Then you forget why you ever put up with someone else's version of your life." "I'm not there yet," I admitted. "But I'm getting closer." I didn't tell her about the dream I'd had the night after Emma's call. A vivid scene where I stood in a gallery surrounded by my photographs, while Robert and Vanessa wandered through, unrecognized and unimportant background figures. In the dream, I felt no anger, no hurt, not even satisfaction at some imagined success. Just peaceful indifference, their lives continuing without relevance to mine. On a sunny Saturday in September, I met with a financial advisor recommended by Michael. The divorce wasn't finalized yet, but the major assets had been inventoried, and the outline of my financial future was taking shape. "You're in better shape than most of my clients in your situation," she said, reviewing my portfolio. "The house equity, your retirement accounts, your portion of the business assets, plus you've maintained your professional certifications. You have options." Options. The word rang like a bell. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, watching fireflies rise from the garden I'd replanted. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake, a photo of him with his new college friends at a football game, smiling broadly. Emma had sent an email earlier with her midterm schedule and plans to bring her new boyfriend home for Thanksgiving. My mother's latest scan showed her cancer remained in remission. Life was continuing, reshaping itself around the broken places. I took out my camera, the new one I'd bought myself, not the old honeymoon relic, and captured the twilight garden, the way the last sunlight gilded the edges of leaves and turned ordinary things luminous. The resulting image was nothing like the tidy, controlled photographs that used to hang in our hallway. It was a bit wild, imperfectly composed, vibrantly alive, much like the woman I was becoming. I'd spent months focused on what I'd lost: a marriage, a partner, a future I'd planned. Now, looking through my camera's viewfinder at my transformed garden, I could finally see what I'd found. Myself, emerging from the shadow of a relationship that had slowly diminished me. The path ahead wasn't the one I'd expected to walk, but it was undeniably mine.